Good evening and welcome back to the Sohn Lecture Series. I'm Michael Diaz-Griffith, the Executive Director of the Sohn Foundation, and on behalf of our board, we are just so pleased that you could join us tonight. Before we begin a most engaging lecture, two notes. One, I've dropped into the chat box a link to register for our next lecture on May 20th. That lecture will be given by Bruce Boucher, director of the Sohn Museum in London, and we hope very much that you will join us for that session. Secondly, tonight, as in previous sessions, there will be a Q&A after the lecture, so please feel free to pop a question into the Q&A box at any point during tonight's presentation. The questions will not be addressed during the course of the lecture, but at the end of the session, and we hope that you will remain with us for that part. And with that, I think I will pass things over to Paul Whalen, our chairman.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody. I want to thank our trustees, first of all, and our program committee led by Jonathan Hogg. And importantly tonight, one of our trustees who's on the program committee, Wendy Moonen, is going to join us for the question and answer period, which will add another level of interest. Now, I think that most of you know that we support the Johnston Museum, and Johnston is not exactly famous for his garden design, but you know, after being cooped up for a year, I think we all deserve a walk in the garden, whether he's famous for his gardens or not. And we are going to talk about rooms and color, which is how we snuck this wonderful topic into our overall lecture theme for the year. Tonight, we're going to be led through various beautiful gardens by Janice Parker. So a little bit about Janice first. Born and raised in New York City, Janice Parker grew up studying the natural and urban environment. Under her guidance, Janice Parker Landscape Architects has been honored with multiple awards, including the 2016, 18, and 19 Stanford White Awards for Garden Design, and the 2015, 19, 20, and 21 Professional Merit Award from the American Society of Landscape Architects. Janice was inducted into the New England Design Hall of Fame in 2017. In 2019, Janice joined the Board of Trustees for Bette Midler's New York Restoration Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to beautifying New York public spaces and creating a healthier environment for those who live in the most densely populated and least green neighborhoods. In 2017, Images Publishing released Designing a Vision, a beautiful book authored by Janice, which showcases the firm's work. Janice, we're so thrilled you could join us tonight, and we're looking forward to our tour.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. And hopefully you can hear and see me. And I will be starting the lecture. So thank you to the Sohn for inviting me here. And I am just having a Zoom moment so that I can actually move the screen. So it's saying I can control it. Ah, got it. Good. Okay. I've been a practicing landscape architect for over 40 years, and this has been a fascinating and compelling profession. I have learned many lessons along the way, and tonight we're going to talk about garden rooms. So I'm going to ask you to take a journey with me for a minute. Sit back and imagine your ideal garden room. What would it be? Would it be enclosed and protected from the outside world? Would it be wide open with views to far meadows or the water? Do you have favorite plants? Would it be filled with flowers or trees or both? Would it be a place of sanctuary? Would it be a place of quiet contemplation? Or would it be simply a garden full of vegetables and fruiting trees? Would it be pink, like this beautiful garden up on the screen? Would it be sunny or shady? Well, the list goes on and on. Would you want to eat outside? Do you want to cook outside? Do you want to sleep and swim? Or do you go inside the minute there are bugs or it's too hot or too cold? What is a garden room to you? Most importantly, what are you going to do outside? Because ultimately, gardens are for people, as the great Thomas Church once said. And what magic are you looking for once you go outside? I know my answers, and they're always changing, but my practice is very concerned with your answers. So let's start tonight talking about what makes a garden room and putting garden design in American garden rooms into a larger context. So in the beginning, when man first ceased to be a nomad and settled in one place, his instinct was to surround himself with a protective wall, probably circular, made out of branches or thorns and scrub. Within this protection, he was safe, his dwelling was safe, his family, and later his cattle was safe. And then he started to plant, or more than likely, the woman started to plant and grow food. Over a period of centuries, as cultivation of food improved with the organization of plants into rows, there became a crude form of irrigation that got worked out. And through these linear requirements of growing food and irrigating, the garden eventually developed into a square or rectangular form. We always know what this feels like, and it's always within us. It makes sense. I'm going to go forward in time now to the influences on American gardens and American garden rooms. So American gardens were originally based on English garden traditions, which by 1675 admired, imitated, and incorporated Italian gardens, such as shown here. French gardening received much of its inspiration and stimulus from the Italian style. Get back one screen. From the Italian style, although worked out on very different lines. The French and Italian influence combined was evolving, and I hold this largely responsible for the tendency of over-the-top garden decor and a lot of ornamentation, which you can also see here. The French and Italian style also involved the Dutch style, which that influence had a lot of topiaries and lots of block planting, vibrant and very rich. The styles then evolved away from grand palaces and complex villa design to a more expansive form, focusing on the land further away from the buildings. This was characterized by water features, lagoons, large open areas, orchards, artificial hills and valleys. We all know that the French created topography to meet their needs and their vision. Versailles was created on a swamp, after all. This large-scale creation of land became a very prevalent style in England. This was the 17th century, and this style held on in England until about 1750. With the introduction and construction of these types of gardens in England, many more unusual garden designs began to evolve, a type of garden where all the elements became symbolic. This included Japanese influences as well. Now you begin to get English gardens that contain French, Dutch, Italian, Chinese, Moorish styles, everything. Around 1750, a gentleman came around in England named William Kent, and he made his appearance and started to create naturalistic effects, and you can see them in a plan here. Everything was to be in a wild state. He had been a painter, and he preferred the Chinese style above all else, and you can see here that as these paths go through the garden, there's China Island, an octagon, Malay hut, Chinese bridge, even a Turkish kiosk. He preferred this Chinese style, and continued to work with it, but he was relatively unsuccessful because a natural landscape had no real meaning for the English at this time. Their ideals were very focused on a formal order. After William Kent came Capability Brown, and two things, these two men had something in common, which was none of them were trained in architecture or horticulture. Beautiful gardens that had existed for centuries, that had become very soft and mellow, started to be torn apart and replaced with more native flora. Houses now opened out onto what was supposed to resemble a simple version of undisturbed fields, undisturbed by any kind of planting and, filled with pastoral scenes. Luckily, this is when this gentleman showed up, Humphrey Repton, in 1803, and he began to pull all this chaos together. He was left with the dictums of the 18th century and the demands of the 19th century, and he did look to find a way of combining the two. The 19th century garden was now becoming a showground. Everything was outside as opposed to an Eastern garden where everything was inside. It was far from relaxed as the Victorians themselves were. He had great talent in architecture, Humphrey, and a small, decent knowledge of horticulture. He trained in Holland. He was the first man to work upon the lines as a landscape designer and an architect, and he even adopted the title of a landscape gardener. He believed in organized plans, which was wonderful, using plant material to help create the desired effects, and using all the elements to enhance the plan that he developed. It's from him that we have the bowling green, or what's called the English green, the large stretch of turf with plants gathered at the corners and shrubs near the house. And it became sort of the beginning of the fundamentals of residential, although palatial, landscape layouts. The entrance should be concealed from the rest of the house. The pleasure gardens were considered outdoor rooms of the house. There were service entrances. He considered the entire state as a composition, and he divided the distance, as we all know, into a middle ground, foreground, and far ground. The immediate foreground, which included the house, the middle distance, which with tree groups aid the view of the far ground, which was the borrowed landscape. He really thought about the way the earth and the ground and the way the house was sited related to the garden. And his red books are amazing. If you're not familiar with them, they actually are fold back. They're like pop-up cards, or maybe it was the Photoshop of the early 1800s. But he would show one scene like this where there was nothing, just the cattle. And then you would look backwards, and he would open up the page and you would see yet another design. So that brings us up to my favorite, something we discuss all the time, Lutyens and Jekyll, the original gardening dream team. One can really not talk about gardens and garden rooms without discussing these two. They were lightning in a bottle. They had building floor plans, the interlocking outdoor rooms, the garden plans, the magic created with the richness of plant material, and the genius for color theory that Gertrude had is still relevant today. Lutyens was like a beloved nephew to Jekyll, and some of my favorite cartoons that he drew for her are here. Landscape planting and horticulture was never an afterthought for Edwin Lutyens. Here he's making obeisance to her, and he called her Aunt Bumps. I've been waiting to be someone's Aunt Bumps for a very long time. She taught him a lot. He was very young when he met her, and I always thought that Aunt Bumps had something to do with the fact that, you know, honestly, she's a little bumpy. But the reality is, as I looked into it further, that he would take his children and his wife to go visit her, and they would go over a road that was very bumpy. So she began to have the title of Aunt Bumps. The design partnership was one in which their talents really dovetailed. The architectural eye that he had in designing the layouts, the landscaping, and the stone structures perfectly complemented Jekyll's artistic use of color and the knowledge of plants. You can see these layouts and these elevations, and you can study them, and they're absolutely fascinating. What was able to be created in a very simple way that all the math worked with the house, all the math worked with the plantings, just absolutely gorgeous. Well, few of them have survived. Their influence over the 20th century gardening was enormous. Their greatest surviving commission is Hester Combe. And the formal garden at Hester Combe is in Taunton near the Great Platte. And it was completed in the 1900s for the Portman family. And you can just see how literally all of the lines and the math is working so beautifully. They collaborated on about 100 gardens of the 400 that Jekyll did in her lifetime. We can definitely admire Edwin Lutyens' buildings and his garden layouts. but they're made so much more complete when they were clothed in the rich artistic planting schemes of Aunt Bumps. Here they are working on the garden, and not a backhoe to be seen. This is fascinating to me. The excavation, the clearing of the fields, the stone walls being built. And in this next picture, you can see the pergola, the loggia, before the top was on it, which is just fascinating to see how all those layouts just interlock and work together, and how the soft, rich foliage really, really clothed all of this architecture in a wonderful way. Just beautiful. It's a gorgeous picture. Now we need a couple of nice, comfortable couches and benches to sit on, and life would be perfect. And the far view. The next garden I'd like to talk about is Hidcote, which is famous for its garden rooms. And I'm using pictures I took, so forgive me if they're not at the exact right time of day with the best overall view. But Hidcote is known among us landscape gardeners as just one of the great places to go, like Mecca, you know, to make a pilgrimage to. Lawrence Waterbury Johnston lived from 1871 to 1958. And this was one of the greatest Edwardian gardens ever created. He was born to American parents, but brought up in France. And his mother bought him a farm of 280 acres, as well as the hamlet that it was in, Hidcote Bartram. And he decided in 1907 to make gardening his hobby. What a hobby. He was a genius hobbyist. When you go through these gardens and these garden structures and garden rooms, the maple garden, the white garden, Mrs. Winthrop's garden with yellow and blue flowers, the pillar garden, which is filled with yews, it's really quite incredible. This is some of the views of inside one of the garden rooms. And this is the RLA of clipped hornbeams, and from all different directions, it's striking. This garden seems to me to not actually have a predetermined master plan. It feels when you're there, and I don't know whether this is true or not, like it just started to happen. And there are some details here that just don't really relate or compare to any other garden. Sort of over wide, out of scale stairs, long and very narrow paths, vistas that strangely go maybe to nothing except a very modest and beautiful iron gate. And it's terminated in very simple and unusual ways. When I was there, one of the things that really moved me the most about it was that there is this great sense that something is out there, something else is happening. And these gentle passages through that are not set up with giant vistas or sculpture or axial lines beyond, just make you this tremendous sense of another world that we might enter into through these rooms. And it's really like a sense of anticipation as you go through these garden rooms. And they connect to each other. You keep going in very domesticated ways that are almost slightly out of scale with the rest of the layout. It kills me, these soft blue and sometimes cobalt blue furniture. I mean, here it is in front of a red beech hedge and Alchemilla mollis at the bottom, a hornbeam pleached hedge beyond with a pathway struck into it. To me, that is the garden room because I can sit down and enjoy it, and it's got some seclusion. You feel compelled to walk through this garden because it's really very unpredictable. And I think that it more than deserves its place in garden making history. Not only for the famous red garden, but for all the different and unexpected views that, like I said, do not seem to be laid out on a perfect plan. There's that simple, very simple iron gate. And this is the pillar garden, which is English yews that have been pruned into pillars and lush borders in between and around them. And you walk through them, and it's really quite the experience, I have to say. And it's beautifully, beautifully maintained. And I've never been there when it isn't completely floriferous and lush. Just a simple iron bench as you look beyond. Sometimes you realize it's what you don't do, not what you do. And there's that vista. And when you talk about luchens, these kinds of tight, thin pieces of stone or pavers or brick put so tightly together to make this kind of wonderful layer cake feeling on stairs and masonry. It's just spectacular and very, very special and very unique to England. I had to bring up Kifsgate Court because it's right next door. And it's mostly famed for its roses. And it's been in the hands of 3 women gardeners since I think it was 1920. And again, sort of these very simple iron gates. And there was no doubt when you walked through this garden that Major Lawrence was a very, very good friend of hers at the garden right next door. Literally, they're next door to each other. And even though it's influenced by Hidcote, it was never formally planned and is considered to be a prettier and less organized place by many. The flower pictures in the tea room at Hidcote, which you saw at the beginning slides, was painted directly on a wall by Major Johnston about Kifsgate. So they were very, very close. There is a brand new water feature that was put in. Well, let me go back. This is the Half Moon garden that I started my career in landscape design worshiping. It just sits there way down a very steep hill, not that easy to get to, and nowhere really to put your towels or your floaties or any of that. But there is a reflection, which you see here, of the tree and the sky beyond. And I think at this point it is really a reflecting pool, not a swimming pool, in a very unusual and beautiful shape. And then they've added this recent garden feature, which is absolutely stunning when you go in. There's a sound that's made by the water that comes through these beautiful leaves. The composition is reminiscent of Russell Page's water features that are at the PepsiCo Gardens in Purchase, New York. But you can walk out onto this simple grass island, which is tightly clipped and absolutely flat. It's beautiful piece of green in the middle of a, obviously with some black ink, pylon black to color the water black in this reflecting pool. And there is this kind of restrained use of color here. It's just simply black and green and gold. And it's a striking contrast to the fact that everywhere else in Kifsgate, there is major color. They are the ones at that garden to first start with the cobalt blue benches, or at least to my knowledge, the cobalt blue benches. I'm sure John Danzer, the great furniture designer, could correct me on that one. But it just is beautiful. And the water spills off of these beautiful bronze leaves in the afternoon. And it's very, very refreshing and very simple, just gorgeous. When you walk in, it's absolutely ethereal. You don't expect it because you're coming out of these really lush and rich and colorful gardens and you walk in. So there's some English, and we're going to come up to American garden rooms. So in America, things were cooking along. Here's Edith Wharton's estate, the Mount in Lenox, Mass. The rarefied and very privileged world of estate design was where many landscape gardeners started out, well-connected, firmly ensconced in the highest levels of society. Beatrix Ferand, who is a very well-known female landscape architect, was the first and one of the first charter members of the American Society of landscape architects. This is a timeline on Beatrix, and we're not going to talk about her. She could be a whole talk, too long, but she had a very, very distinguished career starting in 1899. She joined the American Society of Landscape Architects. She started working a few years before then. And the White House, the National Cathedral, the New York Botanical Garden, which we still visit, the Peggy Rockefeller Rose Garden today, and of course, the famous and the absolutely sublime Dumbarton Oaks. That is really a required visit for anyone in landscape design, I think, or architecture. It certainly is for me. Here you can watch how incredible custom details hold up or don't hold up, how they weather, how they change, how the materials of the outdoor rooms all interact with each other, how the different levels of the site, it's a severely sloping site, were handled and planted, and so much more. In the lower right-hand corner, that was the tennis court. It has become a pebble garden, a water garden. It's just astounding. And the left-hand side, these urns with the iron flowers are some of my favorite ornaments. I've tried relatively unsuccessfully to reproduce them, but I'll keep trying. These details that were carved and unique, there's just so much to see and learn at all times of year here. The outdoor rooms, the outdoor furniture, the way the garden embraces you, the charm of it, it's a triumph. These are the Faran tables, and John Danzer does make these. I covet this in an unreasonable way, these beautiful, simple garden ornaments and furniture. This, I'm sorry, I am remotely controlling a screen, so it's more effective sometimes than others. This is one of my favorite garden ornaments ever. It peeks out from behind some shrubs. Actually, in my last visit, which was about a year and a half ago, they had taken down the iron arches over it and were renovating it. But it's actually a quite diminutive little urn on a pillar, on a plinth. And then these two iron arches of vines of ivy growing over it. I have played with the proportions of this and worked with this for many years. It's a wonderful, unassuming way to have sculpture in the garden, especially if a client isn't a sculpture collector or doesn't have an eye for it. This makes a beautiful garden vignette. You can cover these arches with roses, mix vines on it. You can plant the urn or not plant the urn. It just always has just charmed me. It's just a very subtle, beautiful ornament. And here we have the Peggy Rockefeller garden, which isn't really very subtle, but rose garden shouldn't be. Now I am going to talk about Ellen Biddle Shipman, because she was a very important influence on garden rooms and an incredibly important influence on me. She left me a gift, and we'll talk about that. She was a pioneer in the industry, and she very much starkly contrasted her male counterparts by striving to please her clients rather than dictate or educate, growing a relationship with them, and it was really unmatched in creating unique designs. They were revered, I don't know, for their sense of intimacy and romance and almost sensual seclusion. She viewed her gardens as an experience and a story that was specifically for that client, rather than a space to look beautiful or to put her name on. She created very ephemeral gardens, so most of them have disappeared because nothing disappears faster than plants when they're not tended to. But she was mentored by Charles Platt, an architect and garden designer as well, and had many incredible commissions over her lifetime. And some of these houses are still there and some aren't. Most aren't, but her garden plans are at Cornell University. So here's Charles Platt and Ellen And they were, and this is some plates from Charles Platt's famous book, Italian Villas, where you can see these garden designs were really studied by him and thought about on how, you know, a house connects with a plot of land and how these outdoor rooms are created. Though she differed with him quite a bit as far as making all of these rooms more secluded by hedging and fencing. She was the one who said, however beautiful, a space is not a garden. A garden must be enclosed, otherwise it is simply a cultivated area. And so in this, she really diverged from Charles Platt, who used walls and hedges to establish spatial separation, which you can see here, but rarely offered a sense of seclusion beyond the tall walls of foliage. So these are some older pictures of her gardens, and you can see that they're just very soft and easily lost. Whoops. The Croft Estate in Greenwich, where you can still see this entry, and fountains. She argued, some gardens, like houses, afford little more privacy than a shop window. Better one room that is your own than a whole house that is exposed to the world. Better a tiny plot where you can be alone than a great expanse without this essential attribute of a real garden, which was an enclosure, which is what we're talking about, garden rooms. So here's the gift she left me. It was 2 plots of land with the remnants of Ellen's garden on it. I think there were other adjoining plots of land that the garden elements were removed from, but there was a pool pavilion, there was the remnants of a fountain, which you can see here. It was divided very oddly between the 2 properties, and I was extremely fortunate in having a client who was tenacious and truly believed in respecting the past, which takes a very mature client because it's so much easier to knock everything down. And my collaborator, the architect Sean O'Kane, and we had a total dream team. The remaining balustrades were sent to a restoration company that was able to reproduce them. And we found someone who could do that stucco concrete finish like you see at Dumbarton Oaks. And we were able to restore the fountain, which was very challenging to do, put in new walls. We played with a lot of different paving patterns. There we go, a finished picture. Yeah. And the fountain is here below. We'll get to that in a minute. And beyond, you can see another fountain above and the pool pavilion, which came through many years of neglect in wonderful shape. This is the pool pavilion, and it just needed some basic shoring up, but it was in very, as I said, very good shape and set nicely right on a property line. So luckily it was included, and we created some garden rooms around it. This is one of them, which was an open lawn for parties, with the corners being 4 fastigiate beech, dogwoods beyond, and rose gardens and boxwood parterres on the sides. And here's another picture from below in the garden lawn. Some furniture was chosen by the client and made for the garden. We had rose arches as you come down, very hilly site. This was quite something to restore because all the guts of it were inside this broken stucco wall. And we had a very brave contractor who would clamber in on a ladder and actually got it running again, which was wonderful. Down below, there was this beautiful curved concrete bench, and it reminded me of some of the benches at Dumbarton Oaks. The back was exposed. There were, concrete pavers in there, and it was surrounded by barberry, which I think anyone who gardens knows is a nasty, nasty thing. And we came up with the idea of restoring it with a compass rose with pebbles. mosaics, and nobody really knew how to build it, but we did a couple of samples and it was able to be done. And using different cleft and finished and unfinished pieces of bluestone. And then we filled in with the pebbles to create, at the end of the day, a beautiful centerpiece for this old bench, and then surrounded it with hornbeams. And I definitely, asked Ellen for some advice. And in my head, I'm friends with her. And we talk about plants all the time. And we talked about what to do here. And it's a very rewarding relationship, I have to say. There was the wild stag of Alton Craig, which was the name of this garden. And it was, we made a new one, beautiful bronze antlers. And it's kind of a joke because the deer pressure is so enormous and comes after everything in the garden. But we decided that we would, feature them. And he sits at the bottom of the hill under his rose arches. And we made some grass jointed paths, which we didn't know it, but they ended up looking like the British flag, which was fine. It looks good. But it was funny. I just didn't connect it until I saw it actually built. So I'm so grateful to Ellen for that gift. So we're going to move over just to keep moving around about garden rooms, because there is something so different about Japanese garden design. And these again are pictures I've taken there, so they're not maybe of great sunny days, because I couldn't find one on that trip. But there's a measure of personal privacy that should be and can be achieved in a garden, but it does mean completely blocking out the outside world. And that's a garden room that really holds a lot of meaning in a spiritual way. You create your own sphere of privacy within this, and you find sanctuary and a sense of calm. So this concept mirrors the ideal human condition, a noble person of character with a lack of concern for the outward symbols of their life, which we see in so many Western gardens, but a meaning of the inside space of their life. Their inner soul can breathe and develop in this place of sanctuary to attain inner peace. And by contemplating these features in these very controlled Japanese gardens, that is the spiritual journey. So you imagine these gardens as a place of the soul moving between the garden and the building, and then the garden is the spirit. And these temple gardens are phenomenal in their effect on you when you sit in them. And they always have a place for contemplation. And Japanese gardeners use interior screening devices with great skill. And even the smallest gardens, they add with fencing or some kind of wall, an element of sanctuary and quiet, so that only part of the garden can ever be seen from the house and the rest remains hidden. And in these gardens, the symbolism is incredible. And it is a really incredible place to think, to pray, to have a spiritual experience. Everything about it has meaning. I don't even pretend to be able to explain the different things about it. One of the most amazing things that I find, and you can sort of see this in this picture with this wooden piece in the back, which is not part of a tree, is there is not one tree, old, broken, or young, that they don't put a crutch and a Band-Aid on and brace to be able to keep it alive and hopefully thriving. And that adds another element to the garden, which is one of the human love for the plant world. And that gets really intertwined to the garden experience, this incredible care. One of the things that I can't ever get out of my mind when I'm thinking about a Japanese garden is when you're there, when the gardeners are there, they are just so softly with dustpans and and brushes just picking up the leaves off the moss and caring for every plant with little tiny scissors. And they really are incredibly manicured gardens. And one man's sense of control is another man's place where he want to tear his hair out. Some people want to be in a garden room that's robust and thriving and, you know, overwhelming amounts of plants and things too tight together and lots of color. And other people find calm in this kind of a garden. I find it tense. I find the dynamic in it tense, and other people find it very relaxing. So your garden room needs to be what makes it work for you. So this quick timeline brings us up to the landscape of consumerism. The story of suburbia is fascinating, and it's massive and way above my pay grade. But the encouragement to buy homes after World War II changed everything about how America viewed gardens. People were able to go out in an afternoon and buy a house. And rarely do people talk about the landscape. It's basically a house on a piece of land with grass in the front, grass in the back, and a little bit of grass on the side. So outdoor rooms for gardening on these tracts didn't exist. The models were not there. But it came into the consciousness of the American homeowner in the late 50s with Thomas Church in California, and in England it was John Brookes. They both wrote seminal books on this, and one was called Gardens Are for People by Thomas Church, and one was called The Room Outside by John Brookes. These absolutely summed it up. They talked about what we do when we go outside. How do we make a garden room? And I use these principles every day. They both said they meant the same exact thing. It seems more, and I quote, "It seems more than ever essential that the individual and his family should have somewhere where they can enjoy themselves, in a place where they can retreat, somewhere quiet where they have the time to think and enjoy and refresh themselves by reestablishing contact with nature. If one looks at the garden throughout history, this role of a place of escape has always been important. Nevertheless, it is only one of its uses, for the garden is fundamentally a place for use by people. Until one has determined what to do in a garden, how can a plan be provided? In whatever part of the world and whatever period in history, the garden has always adapted itself to the needs of the owner, whether providing shelter from nature, retreat from the heat, a place for entertaining, household use, or even just a place for parking your cars. Plants are important, of course, but the first consideration should be the fitness of the garden for family use." So this is a big watershed moment. I studied with John Brookes in England and stayed friends with him until his passing a few years ago. And we go back and visit him every year. And he was not only my friend, but my mentor. This is the Donald Garden, which is probably well known to most of you in California by Tommy Church. This was done so long ago. And we rarely reach this kind of gorgeous design today. And he didn't have anything to look at, to model it on. And we've had this to look at since the 50s. This incredible shaped pool with then a matching island, the sculpture in the middle of the pool. This is really beautiful, beautiful work. And this is John Brookes, The Room Outside, which still is published in new and new editions. This is John and I sitting in his garden. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. And pictures of when I did study with him in the 80s. And there he is as a young man with the Queen. I thought I would have to show that picture. And, you know, we are all chasing a spatial organization around our house footprint. We want the magic that will blend the house, the site, and our desires. And very often, the arbitrary arrangement of the garden rooms appears to bear little relationship to the house. So this is John's garden in England, and he is using this cobalt blue furniture that is absolutely stunning throughout the garden, creating garden rooms everywhere he puts this furniture, having fun with size, having fun with formality, pruned, unpruned gardens. Here we go. sorry, having a little trouble with the changing of the screen. That blue with the red is just incredible. The red bloodgood maple with the blue cobalt bench, the amazing variety of plants that are available in this garden to see, and the layout that he does. It's just beautiful. Creating patterns in gravel, garden ornament. I lived and worked at this garden for a long period of time, and I really know every inch of it, and it's always a pleasure to be there and to walk through it. And this is some of the work that he drew himself in the gardens that he designed. So let's have some fun and just look at some of the most cutting edge garden designers, I think, working today, who come to the Chelsea Flower Show and set up garden rooms by their very nature. Because this is how they win their gold medal, their coveted gold medal, or don't. And these are some of the effect of, walls going in that have bling on them now, which I think is beautiful, especially for a small secluded area. Sculpture, water, decking, overheads, sort of very creative and beautiful thoughts about going, changing levels, getting furniture built in, just lovely stuff. And if you notice, a lot of yellow. And maybe 1 out of 20 of my clients likes yellow. And not liking yellow is a huge mistake, because yellow, as John Brookes taught me, brings gold and sunlight and a lot of vibrancy and magic to a garden, even if you bring it in chartreuse, like in this picture. So I put this in just so that we can say, yes, yellow. It is, people want a white garden, a red garden, a no color garden. Now that is very, very simple to do. You need true horticultural mastery to realize anything close to Jekyll, and you need a spectacular understanding of plants and flowers in a mix. But you also need a lot of luck, and you need yellow. Look at it. When it shows up, it just lights up the garden. I'm not sure you would definitely have any of these effects in your house, but they're really quite gorgeous. And the idea of what you can do with an outdoor space is really investigated beautifully in these show gardens. And the plantings and the green roof are so much more interesting than sedums. I've never been able to understand why we're putting sedum all over every roof when we could be putting so many beautiful native plants on instead. And this was a winner. This won the gold medal, which I didn't quite understand at the time. This is Andy Sturgis did this. It's industrial piece then planted throughout. They bring in the trees, they bring in everything. It's very stunning and interesting to celebrate sort of the industrial. This garden was done by I know his name, he's a friend of mine, it's going to come to me, but these are David Harbour sculptures. And this garden, it was very soft, very natural. It did not win a medal, but it was absolutely stunning. Here's a place for your motorcycle in your Japanese garden, which of course we all need that. I can't even imagine not having a Japanese garden without a motorcycle. So the grounds for sculpture, these are all things that can be added into and make a garden room. Sculpture as a focal point, sculpture as part of the room to hold to your eye, sitting on your path as you walk through. We are all looking for the harmony, and geometry and materials. Oh, let me just say, this is called the Grounds for Sculpture. This is a garden in New Jersey, really worth visiting, that is filled with sculpture. And they create these, this is, from Monet's garden. It's just incredible. And the plantings and the arrangement of the sculpture gives you incredible ideas. This is actually a garden vignette right out of a Monet painting at the garden, Grounds for Sculpture. And it's literally a garden that you visit where you see people and children running through, so excited. So it really works as a place for people. This is a beautiful Robert Stern garden that just shows water as a centerpiece. And lyrical plantings around water always reflects, I think, the mood that a pool can give you. This is a Chelsea garden, water garden with a water centerpiece. And, you know, waters in garden is a whole nother subject, and how it reflects the sky and reflects shadows and what it does in a space by adding that fourth element of water. One thing you can be sure it will do is add magic. This is just a row of herbs, orbs, not herbs. That's in the vegetable garden section next. This is orbs that were laid out to create in LA through a farm. This is, that was my work. And vegetable gardens, which are also fantastic to actually go and sit in them, which is something we've been doing because the farmer is never wrong. The grids and fields of crops that work for production, as we saw at the beginning of my talk, definitely is a primal sense that we understand. Stylization of grids and row patterns where we can grow fruit trees and flowers that harks back to the earliest gardens that were laid out, has developed attachments for all of us, especially in people wanting to grow their own food, which is relatively simple. And we have started to do vegetable gardens in more and more decorative ways, and reorganizing the grid into patterns that reflect the house, that work with the math of the rest of the layout of the garden, that have nice gates that maybe the children of the family decide what they want as a cutout in them, what the family icon is. We've done cats, we've done ravens, we've done a lot of different things, and makes the, you know, really a unique your own garden. We do not really want these gardens to become too heavily horticultural, but growing produce is pretty simple. And there's an endless variety of things you can do in the garden. Even if you don't want to grow vegetables, you can have a cutting garden, as in this one. You can sit in it and make it quite modern, as in this one, which was all herbs and tomatoes and just some flowers. And in the classic, more stylized designs, this is, of course, in France, where you're growing vegetables inside of clipped germander hedges, which is just an incredible amount of work if you try that at home. I wouldn't try it at home. It's easier to use some stone and lay out your garden beds, but you know, there is nothing more beautiful than those French vegetable gardens. And there's a kitty cat going into this garden, and roses surrounding it for cutting. This garden we did a long time ago, and it's still really producing an enormous amount of beautiful vegetables and fruit. And this garden, which is a cutting garden as well as a vegetable garden that has furniture in it, a fireplace, it's off the back of a garage. And it really took an area that wasn't used much and made it into a full garden room. So we're going to simply go through a lot of this further elements of garden rooms. This is an incredible little garden. I have no idea who did it. I found a picture of it, with this lovely, simple little bistro table and this charming, very welcoming fence into this garden. And it just makes you want to go in there and sit down. And I think we all understand that. This is a wonderful picture that came from a book that John Danzer just sent me on rattan and the origins of rattan garden furniture. Now that is a garden room, as is that. And rattan has been outside for centuries. And these are very simple, beautiful, lush senses of enclosure and comfortable furniture to sit on. And one of the things that I think are most important for a garden is the furniture, if it's going to be a room outside. Because without a piece of furniture that says you belong here, You can come out here and you can sit down and it fits you and you fit it. It's hard to know what to do if you're just walking through a garden, and it's hard to spend time there. It's obvious. I mean, it's a very obvious principle, but rarely followed as much as I think it should be. And being able to even put a bench in the distance is what says you can walk through this field and it is domesticated. There is a place for you. These pergolas are, we took these pictures of these pergolas we've done in the fall, and they create their own garden rooms. And the whole idea of the loggia and the pergola came from extending the architecture from the house out into the garden and making almost a cosmic plan of creating the outdoor rooms that you can flow in and out of easily. This one was curved. This one was for living with kids, with a kitchen and lots of furniture. This was actually styled, someone may recognize it, on a beautiful pergola in Central Park. And we took all the pictures and measured it and replicated it to a certain degree. And it's just stunning, really stunning. And with fireplaces, by pools. And I just wanted to bring up Anushka Hempel, who's a goddess of design, because she certainly creates gardens that take an enormous amount of cultivation and care. But she's so sharp and so chic, and the scale and proportions are so good that this is not mere ornamentation. I mean, this is beautiful, serious design. And, you know, this brings up what my good friend John Danzer always says, which is there are many, many, many chairs out there. You can get chairs, there's thousands, but there's only a few great tables. And a really good table will hold your garden room year round. You don't have to actually be sitting at it. Look how these tables just create this room. If you're never, you know, I often think about gardens without furniture as you might think about an orphaned room in your house. You have let's say you're never going to have a dinner party. You're never going to use your formal dining room. But if you walk by it and there's no furniture in it, it's an orphan. If you put a beautiful dining set in there, when you walk by it, that room has purpose, it has meaning. Even if you're not sitting in it, you can't leave your garden orphaned. You need to put in some benches, you need to put in, look at this, just a table sitting by itself. And then this room has a purpose and a meaning. It doesn't matter if you don't use the purpose of it, but it gives the room meaning. Once you find a great table, you will find chairs. And even in the winter, this table sitting outside between these clipped trees on this gravel pad like a rug creates a room that I would find beautiful to look at, whether I was using it or not. But without the table, not as much. So this is furnished rooms that I wanted to show you, garden rooms, some pergolas, mixed in with seating and lush herb gardens and furniture throughout. Koi pond and then the pool beyond. Continuing with furniture, even sitting up above the sound, sitting around a fire pit. And here's a garden we did years ago, but we got the furniture, the blue furniture. And you'll see so many influences in current designs, English, Japanese, Italian, French. And I think that's all a very good thing, because we're all looking for the magic that's going to blend the site, our desires, our home into a garden room that we will find our peace and our sanctuary in. And maybe we won't really even be sure whether we're inside or outside. Maybe we just belong in these garden rooms for contemplation, for any of the many things that we could do in them.
Thank you so much, Janice, for this enthralling lecture. We have gone from the beginning of time to the present day, and every stop in the journey has been delightful and engaging. And with that, I think we'll begin our Q&A. Paul?
Thank you, Janice. That was, thank you for taking us outside. I feel like you've made us long even more for the days that are coming up of late spring, early summer gardens. And it's just, what a wonderful way of seeing spring come towards us. I'm wondering, when there are so many choices in what you've shown us, when you show us the history of these gardens and all the different kinds of gardens that you've done, when you work with a client, I'm wondering how you educate them or how you help them make decisions, and how much you really are there to listen to their wishes, and how much you might be there to tell them, well, you know what, you might think that's your wish, but let me tell you, maybe your wish is really this. I mean, how much do you push and pull between what they want and what you might educate them into wanting?
So as I quoted Ellen Biddle Shipman saying that she didn't really see her job was to educate or dictate to clients, that it was more to give them what they really want. And I have always seen my job that way. As I've gotten older and crankier, though, I do feel like dictating a lot. And there are people who need it, and there are people who don't like it. So I try to pick and choose those things. There generally are enough constraints on the pieces of land that we're working on, whether they're regulatory constraints or whether they're shade or sun constraints, that I can manipulate a design to go in maybe a better direction than they were looking for. But what I find most people aren't understanding enough is how they're going to use the outdoors.
Right. Do you ever take them on tours to help them understand what spaces might be like, or is it more to photographs?
I do. Yeah. I do. And I like to be able to take them to projects, and even to projects that might be under construction as well, and to nurseries. Often, if something interesting will happen, is we're standing in a nursery in a grove of trees that are all root balled, let's say, that for sale. And it's a burning hot day. This happened last year. You walk inside those trees and it was 20 degrees cooler. And all of a sudden it clicks. Right. Oh my God, I want this. I'll be shaded. It will be cooler. It will be more beautiful. So there's opportunities all the time to discuss how to create a real outdoors.
Wonderful. Wendy, do you have some thoughts? You want to jump in? Oh, you're muted though, Wendy. Oops.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm just wondering how COVID has affected your practice. I actually just did an article about how landscape architects have been forced to do outdoor dining rooms, outdoor kitchens, bocce courts. One was a private bullfighting ring in Mexico. I mean, the most outrageous things. And as well as cutting gardens, raised gardens, vegetable garden, meditation rooms, yoga rooms, Pilates rooms. What have you found?
Well, all of that except the bullfighting. But we certainly did have a request, and we're working on a spa room where it would be a glass ceiling that opened up and it would snow inside. So there is an incredible amount of attention focused on the fact that the outdoors has always felt dangerous. There's bugs, there's weather, there's all Lyme disease, there's all these things you can't control. And then we're told that the outside is safe, that we can only socialize outside, that we can only entertain outside, that we'll be able to see people outside. And it's been a huge shift that I think is very positive, and I really think will stick with people, because once they started to spend more time outside, they love it, absolutely love it. And I talked to so many people during the worst time of COVID, when they really didn't want you to come over to the house or to talk about anything. And they had no outdoor furniture and they weren't really living outside. And I would just tell them, take the lightest furniture in your house outside. Just take it outside and sit there. You don't have time to go buy it. You need to get out.
Yeah. But you've done very beautiful fire pits.
Yes. And we did a lot of marquees, outdoor marquees for the winter, where, a tent was built, but with heaters. But when they were entertaining, the size went up. Then the heaters were on and they were sitting there having dinner parties and it was very cold outside. And I was saying, in that town, the grid must go brown when the so-and-sos are entertaining. Oh, they're having a dinner party again. And then, you know, there's a brownout because they're just burning so much electrical power to keep these spaces warm enough. But there was a lot of desire for that. And I don't think we should be outside entertaining when it's 20 degrees out, but I do think that we should be outdoors more.
Well, and how important is water, the sound of water or sound in your practice? Because you've done so many beautiful fountains and water features. Is sound important to you?
It is, and sound and scent are hugely important to me. I love the flowers that at night emit a strong scent. I'm always looking for scented flowers for the gardens. The sound is different for everybody. Some people love it. They ask me to put it in for sound attenuation because they can hear a highway or a bridge. And then like 3 years later, I'll get a call from that same client who had to have the sound saying, turn it off. Turn it off. The constant bubbling, gurgling, it's driving me mad. Where is the off switch? And meanwhile, that was all they loved, you know, at the beginning. So, you know, I think that water is often used for sound attenuation in my practice more than for having the sound. And we're on rooftop gardens and things where you might, or even in a small suburban lot where you might not be able to do a water feature. There are great sounds, you know, you can get nature sounds, you know, and play them on speakers, and water sounds and play them on speakers. So, you know, if you don't have a budget for it, you can still get the sound of water.
And you don't get the bugs that way.
Exactly, or the plumber.
I'm wondering if you have very religious feelings about nighttime lighting in gardens, which I have a feeling some people must hate and other people must think it's great. Do you have a particular feeling about nighttime lighting? Should gardens go to sleep, or are you fine with them as a kind of nighttime disco at night if necessary?
Well, I think that the problem is that outdoor lighting is rarely done softly and well. It's not inexpensive to put in, and to have it appear that it's not there, that it's incredibly soft, that you don't see the light fixture or the point of light, is a tough sell. You know, say spend all this money and you're not going to really know you have it. But that is the best way to have it. And you want to be very careful not to light evergreens because it just creates a hot spot. Oh. And path lighting is necessary for security and for safety, but never my favorite because you see it. But what does concern me, if people go outside and there's great rechargeable lights, and you can, you know, no matter how you do landscape lighting, you can't actually sit at a table and talk to someone and see their face, because most likely that tree lighting is pretty far away from you. But there are great rechargeables and you really can enjoy that. But the house might look like a big dark Hulk. So it concerns me more in the whole picture of the outdoors is that, you know, trying to explain to people, turn the lights on when you go outside, you know, turn them on upstairs, turn them on downstairs, keep them at a certain level so that it's soft and glowing, but not, you know, look like a surgical theater is going on inside. And getting those levels of light correct will add an enormous amount to your nighttime scene, the warmth of the house. And, you know, I really find that soft lighting is best. But then as I age, the soft lighting is too soft and I'm going to fall down. So you have to be able to adjust it.
I love the idea that the garden lighting could be fixed just by dimming the lights inside your house just to the right level, and then you're done. That sounds so great.
You don't want hulking dark spaces that don't feel welcoming.
Right, exactly.
You know, and that's what you want your lighting to do. You don't want a light show.
Right.
Right. And you don't want light up, pop up runway trees, which is what, you know, I hate the lighting that I see, outdoor lighting, most of the time, because it's just hot spots and too bright. But if they were turning it down, it might actually be beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have a host of interesting questions coming in from the audience. But first, Janice, there's also great praise for your talk, which we also wish to communicate. It has been so entertaining in addition to educational, and we always like that. One question that's popped up several times is regards your work on historic gardens. And James asks, how do you balance conservation, both perhaps in terms of the architecture as well as in terms of the horticulture, with new design, being innovative and vital in the space that you're restoring?
Well, that's the best thing about it is that dance, you know, it's a fine dance. It's a very fine dance. And when I was asked before about by Paul about educating clients, that's one of the first times I really put my foot down with a client, was that we were not going to remove the paths, even though they were bumpy, they were brick that, you know, and he said, I'm going to have parties, people wear heels. I'm like, if we change them, it will be the truth that they're no longer old. You know, so you don't restore by putting it all new in the same design. You know, the only way you keep the history is to keep the things that are historic. So we reasoned with him, and I rolled a lot of mulch and stone dust into the joints between. And it is a little treacherous in that part of the garden if you're in heels, but it takes a very, very smart and very mature client to understand all of that. And if they love history, you can keep them moving in that direction. As far as renovating the planting goes, I try to communicate with that original garden designer. And I think if he or she had this available, they would probably use it. And I have been involved in the preservation of certain old gardens and looked at them and thought, I don't think that was their best day. I'm not sure they'd want this garden kept. I mean, I'm sure architects feel that way too. Just because they designed it doesn't mean this was that good a piece of their work. Do you know what I mean? Maybe they were fine with letting it go. And most landscape architects and garden designers that I know, we're absolutely fine with letting it go. I mean, this is a planting, living, breathing thing. Rip it out, start again. I'm fine with it. I don't think there is this attachment. And maybe that's something that I pick up from Biddle Shipman, in that her gardens did disappear. They were ephemeral. That was the beauty of them, right? You don't have to leave it forever. And I think we are supposed to, it's always left to the younger generation to fix what the older generation left us, but we're supposed to bring it forward. I feel that would be that designer, that architect, that owner's wish. To to not preserve it, but in perpetuity, but to give it a life, to keep it vital, especially with gardens, because the old trees are dying, the young ones have to come in. You have to keep going with that.
Yeah. Do you think Russell Page would have been as flexible as what you're describing? More of a control freak to me.
Yes, but that means that he'd know when those plants had gotten out of scale and he'd want them brought back. Yeah. So Beatrix Ferand wrote this incredible treatise on the maintaining of Dumbarton Oaks, where she's talking about these hollies on Georgetown Avenue. And they went in at 8 feet. They can grow to 16 feet. Then you need to keep pruning them. After you prune them over a period of about 20 years, you need to rip them out and start again. And, that is the truth. I said to an interior designer friend of mine, the client may not like your couch, this gorgeous couch, they don't like it, but you don't come back to see the couch and find it dead, right? The couch is still there. It's the couch you designed and ordered. She just doesn't like it. I come back, there's nothing there. It's gone.
Yeah. A question has recurred in the comments about critters and animals, and it has a practical component and a philosophical component. The practical component is how do you manage how to best manage critters, bugs, etc. in garden rooms so that you can enjoy them at their most beautiful. The philosophical side of this regards the fact that garden rooms enclose, they keep things out, right? They keep perhaps even animals out that you want to interact with. So how do you balance that in terms of inviting critters in that you want to see, keeping ones out that you don't want to see, keeping the garden healthy?
Well, I'd say that I don't want to see the critters who are going to eat everything.
I agree.
I'm happy to keep them out.
I'm with you on that one.
Right. The deer pressure that we're experiencing is enormous. And not to get into a whole conservation lecture, but there will not be hardwood forests for our great-grandchildren. There is nothing coming up on the floor of the forests. The deer are eating all the native, I mean, invasive trees are coming up, but the native oaks, the maples, the things that we want, they're not there. They're eating them. And the deer are only going to be, I mean, that's a very big subject that I've worked on with a lot of different conservation agencies, but you must do enclosures. At the end of the day, it's exclusion that will work, and you should exclude them. And these populations are out of balance. They're just out of balance. You know, there's a lot of answers for bugs. And there's different levels of tolerance for bugs, you know, and a good fan, a good breeze will keep them off you. And there's nothing wrong with using good, strong fans outside. There's certainly people who have anaphylactic issues and don't want bees around their kids. There are definitely flowers that don't attract bees. And you should really think about that when you're planting. There's a certain element of spraying and chemicals that people do for ticks, and that does kill everything else though. So you're not going to get as many birds because they don't have anything to eat. Birds are able to be kept away from certain areas from covering your furniture with bird stuff by owls and you know, stuff like, you know, you can really scare off birds from certain areas, but you want birds. You absolutely want birds in your garden, and they're worth more than the trouble that they cause, always. The very best protection, I always tell people, for bugs is on you. You know, wear a hat, wear the shoes that you can just lather on, that skin's so soft, or, you know, something that is not actually toxic to your nervous system, but the bugs will stay away from you. They will absolutely stay away from you. It's the best protection you can do. It's a lot better than killing every single insect in your soil.
Thank you for that. And a final question from the audience about that brings us back to architecture and perhaps to some of the designers you referenced in the talk. Some of those designers locate garden rooms next to the house. They kind of mediate between the interior rooms and the landscape. But there are other designers who locate garden rooms out in the landscape, and one sort of traverses a field or an open expanse to get to the garden room that's away from the house. In terms of contemporary practice, what do you prefer? If a house is out in a field, what, would you locate garden rooms next to it? Do you like this idea of a destination? What are your thoughts?
Both. Obviously, right next to the house is convenient. You know, and for people who might be young or might be old, the closer, the better. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, unless you have a bathroom and some cold drinks and things like that, the first thing that happens, you do this big, beautiful pool room out in the middle of nowhere. If you do not have a kitchen and a bathroom at it, the first thing that happens when people get there is, you know, they want something to drink and they have to use the bathroom, and then everyone goes back to the house. So, I mean, this is just exactly how it goes. And it has to be accommodated, you know, if you're going to use it. There's nothing more beautiful than that half moon pool we looked at Kiff's Gate, but how do you use it? How do you really use it? So I think that it depends on the person. I've had a lot of architects say to me, they do not want to look outside of the house and see the furniture on the terraces. They want to see the outdoors. And I say to them, you know, it doesn't bother me when I'm sitting in the dining room to look over and see the furniture in the living room. It's not a problem for me. As a matter of fact, if I didn't see furniture in the living room, I'd be worried. So, you know, I'm not concerned that you're going to see furniture from inside the house. I think it's going to pull you outside. And I think that you want to get out there with your coffee and a paper, and you want to get out there every morning if you can. So that's going to be nearby. And then if you've got the time, you can go further. But I can tell you that when we do things close to the house, it's the segue to nature's magic and Mother Nature taking over and enticing everyone to go to that further place. My job is so easy if I pay just a little bit of respect to nature, just a little bit, like 4%, she'll do 96% of the work. She'll just do it. It's a great partner, you know, the light, the shadows, the morning, the evening, all of those magic that nature creates. I can get you out there with a few pretty plants and a chair, and then she's going to do the work.
I love that attitude. It sounds like a nice way to get through life too, I must say. Let nature do 95% of the work, you'll live a lot longer. Janice, thank you so much. This has been such a treat. You've really, everybody's really enjoyed this. And you've, as I said, I feel like you brought spring to us.
Oh, good.
So, and now for all of you out there listening to this wonderful lecture, our next lecture is going to be on May 20th. And Bruce Boucher, the Soane Museum director, is going to give a wonderful lecture on what we're calling a colorful collaboration between John Soane and Joseph Gandy. And for those of you who don't know who Joseph Gandy was, he is the wonderful artist and renderer who illustrated almost all of John Soane's work and illustrated so many of them that there are in fact many more of those drawings remaining of John Soane's work than there are of the original buildings. Many of them weren't built or they were torn down. And so, and Joseph Gandy had his own vision too. So it was a kind of a push and pull between the architect and the renderer and what came first, what came second. It's a very interesting topic. And so I hope you'll all join us on May 20th. And I think it's at 1 p.m, right, Michael? It's a rare afternoon lecture for us. Have lunch before or during, you'll be all set. And you look forward to seeing you then.
And we'll toast the end of our Color and Light series on May 20th. We're also beginning to look forward to next autumn. Our next series will be called Rule and Invention, and we'll be telling you much more about that in an upcoming newsletter. Additionally, we have set the date for the Soane Honors, and that date is October 20th, when we will, we'll meet in
calendar.
Mark, save the date. We'll be meeting in New York City in person if it's possible, but there will also be a virtual component for the event that we will pursue no matter what else happens. So mark October 20th on your calendars. Look forward to much more information about the Soane Honors soon. And for those of you who asked specific questions of Janice, including a friend or two, I think, we'll circulate the Q&A report to her so that she can respond to you directly. We may also include some responses from her in the extended Q&A edition of our newsletter that we'll be sending after Bruce's lecture to kind of round up the discussions we've had this season. So with all of that, please note that there's a Zoom link to register for that event in the chat, and we'll leave this session up for a couple of minutes after we all go off the screen so that you can click on that link and navigate to Zoom to register for the next event.
And
There was a
thank you,
question, by the
Janice.
way, as to whether this lecture would be available afterwards. Yes, we always post these lectures. It may take several days, it may take a week to do a little editing, but all of our lectures are posted on the John Soane Foundation website, so you can go there to find them.
And we'll be including the link to our YouTube account as well in the chat. If you subscribe to our channel, you'll be notified the second the new video is posted. And I'm seeing, like Paul is, that several people are already ready to view the lecture. So see us on YouTube and have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Guys.
Thanks, Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janice.
See you
Thank
all.
you so much.
Good night.